you take that number and look at the census that was posted on itl.org, you would see that they would fill up all of Rhode Island and become the 8th largest state in the US. So hoarding is the act of collecting items to the point of insanity to where your house is completely unusable. So it's easy to think about what it's like to look like a hoarder, but it's completely different what it's like to feel like a hoarder. So you know that feeling you get when you're in a crowded bus, a crowded elevator, or a busy mall. And imagine that same feeling of claustrophobia in your house, and you cannot escape it. That's what hoarding feels like. So I actually have family members who have suffered from hoarding, and even I have had problems with OCD habits in the past. So I've seen through my research and looking at my family that hoarders typically do not keep just to keep things, but it's because they're trying to barricade themselves away from the pains of their past. So in this speech, I'd like to share with you the starting points of OCD habits, how it can lead into hoarding, and then how it goes into the long-lasting effects. So with any OCD habit, there's always a trigger, and the trigger can have many causes. In the 2011 Psychology and Psychotherapy by Leanne Carpenter, she states that kids can have, habits can start from childhood at any time, and the most common is normally by an abusive or chaotic household. And she also states that kids suffer from alexithymia, which literally means no meaning for words. Kids cannot express themselves easily, so they do new things to cope with the problems. So actually, when I was really young, I had about 8 or 7, I had these problems with twitching and blinking, just these nervous little habits. It wasn't until my grandpa came to visit me one day, and he looked at me right in the eye and said, you know, you're really ugly when you blink. Why do you do that so much? When he said that, it sent me into a spiral, and my habits got really bad. And fortunately, it happened right before I had a church performance, so now all we have is a video of me on the stage twitching and blinking like crazy. My parents could not figure out what was going on. You know, they didn't know why all of a sudden it started because I wasn't telling them what happened. It wasn't until they heard my grandpa tell me again the same thing that they realized that's what happened. That was the trigger that started this whole thing. Once they were able to see that, they were able to help me and get over it, and now I don't suffer from it anymore. But a lot of people aren't that lucky, and it goes into a long-lasting effect, and it can turn into something worse, or most commonly, one is hoarding. So in the 2011 Clinical Social Work Journal by Jordana Miroff, she states that hoarding has many different starters, and it can be chaotic or abusive household, or it can even be multiple personalities or a really startling trigger. So I have an aunt who does hoard, and if you were to see her in person, you would never know. She was a sociology professor in LA. She was very strict, very organized. If you see her house, you would never know. The grass is freshly cut, house is freshly painted, it's a really nice house. You walk into the house, you see that there's a problem. It's floor to ceiling stuff. And the reason I say it starts with OCD habits is because she was a case where she did start with the OCD habit. She had these things with napkins, where she'd sit for hours and fold these paper napkins hours on end, and it was to help relieve her stress. But you could not touch these napkins because they were hers, and she stacked them in a way in her kitchen. Her kitchen's full of paper napkins, and we could never use them. And in the 2011 article of Comorbidity and Hoarding Disorder, Randy Frost states that hoarders get GAD, or general anxiety disorder. They get so anxious when you touch their stuff that they become angry. It's because they're losing control over the situation. If it's left untreated, it can go into really long-lasting effects. In the 2009 Journal of Clinical Psychology, Dominic O'Connor states that hoarders become stuck in their ways. They're living in this mess for so long, they almost don't realize it's different. It's normal to them. And you simply cannot fix hoarder's problem by throwing everything away. My uncle wanted to clean the house because it was too dirty for him. So I was not there during the cleanup, but he told me and the whole family that there was over 2 tons of trash that was taken out of the house. Because it was not taken looked at the start, my aunt was not involved in the cleanup. He did everything. It went right back to the way it was. Their house was usable. She was finally able to use her bed after for 2 years. She was not sleeping in her bed. But because it was not fixed, it went exactly to the way it was before. And in the 2011 article of Separation Anxiety and OCD, Jack Samuel states that hoarders suffer with SAD, or separation anxiety disorder. She was separated from her stuff that they become so anxious because it's all gone. That's their livelihood. So in this speech, I have shared how hoarding can start with OCD habits, goes into hoarding, and the long-lasting effects. And through the research and a look at how it affects my family, I've seen that hoarders typically do not hoard just for the sake of keeping things, but it's to barricade themselves away from something that happened in their past. So if you are not a hoarder and you're the first to look at this box, you know, it's ripped, it's tattered, you throw it away right away. It doesn't mean anything. But if you see that hoarding started somewhere, the reason it even started, you can unravel the first level, and you now see that hoarding had a trigger. The OCD had a place where it started. Once you can find what that is, you can now unravel and open the box and see that the things that they keep are things that are important to them. This is their life, this is what makes them happy. They really do bring new meaning to one man's trash as another man's treasure.